research to innovation, strengthening access, facilitating process. Over the next 2 hours or so, with the assistance of our esteemed guests, we'll be covering topics such as building a strong technology innovation support center network, research supporting innovation and driving development, and also looking at the issue of branding. To start proceedings off today, I would like to welcome our campus librarian, Dr. Paulette Carr.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lewis Marshall, and good morning to everybody. I want to greet Mrs. Lily Claire Bellamy, Executive Director of JIPO, and all the staff of JIPO. Our presenters, including Dr. Marcus Duff, who I see is wearing 2 hats this morning as Mona Law Senior Lecturer, and he's also a Deputy Director of JIPO. Dr. Shara Watson, who is the Executive Director of SRC, and Dr. Natalie Cortese, who is a Senior Lecturer and Associate Dean at Mona Law. I also want to welcome specially invited guests, members of the UWI community, members of the LIS community, and of course our own UWI Mona Library staff. And just in case I have left out anybody, or all other distinguished ladies and gentlemen, good morning and a warm welcome to you to the UWI Mona Library and this webinar, Research to Innovation, Strengthening Access, Facilitating the Process, which is being offered as part of the UWI Mona Library Open Week 2021 in collaboration with the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, JIPO. During Open Week, the Mona Library intentionally engages with our community and stakeholders. And this webinar really is part of our ongoing goal of sensitizing stakeholders of the UWI Mona and the wider community that there is support for intellectual property. I feel so strongly about the fact that robust research and innovation being part of and at the heart of the academy, that success in this particular area will only be realized through deep collaboration. So when a technology and innovation support center was launched in Jamaica at UWI Mona in 2019, it was done in partnership with the Mona Library and with experts, JIPO, the Mona Office of Research and Innovation, MORI, as well as MEC, the Mona Entrepreneurship and Commercialization Center. Of course, you'll hear later, and I'm sure Ms. Bellamy will talk about the fact that TISCs are undergirded by the World Intellectual Property Office, which provides training and support for staff, students, and members of the community. But it's collaboration. Just to update you too, that as part of this, the support, the Mona Library's Intellectual Property Desk is designed to provide a gateway to IP support to the Mona and the wider communities. So since the launch, what we've been doing is really just to focus on scaffolding our staff with necessary competencies in IP. Several of our library staff, they have enrolled in and have completed courses in areas such as understanding patents, copyright, trademarks through the WIPO e-learning center. Some have benefited from our Mona Library JIPO intellectual certificate course. And recently, 3 members of our team participated in 4 days of JIPO IP valuation consulting training workshop. Our staff members also participate in webinars organized by JIPO and their affiliates. So we have been focusing on that. This commitment to keeping abreast of matters relating to IP enables us to serve the community through our IP help desk. As I said before, the TISC must be a collaborative initiative and endeavor. Our clients through our IP help desk can gain access to patent and design databases, which are pushed through JIPO and WIPO. They can receive answers to their questions. And of course, we are very open to provide referral guidance with IP research to our expert partners. It is hoped that this webinar, as Mrs. Lewis Marshall said, will sensitize our communities to different aspects of the research and innovation landscape. Namely, I think, to the intrinsic role of collaboration for a strong TISC network towards supporting innovation and research, the interconnectedness between research and innovation, how branding, for example, enables profit, and of course, to the supporting role of the UEMONA Library in providing access to a range of IP-related resources through our IP desk. I am so grateful to the staff of the MONA Library and of course JIPO for organizing this very, very important webinar during Open Weeks. I really want to big up our staff members. And I am grateful to the expert panel for agreeing to share with us this morning, and for all of you for joining us. Welcome and enjoy this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Carr, for your welcome and opening remarks. We are going to head to our first speaker and the director of our main collaborator in this venture, JIPO. I'm going to briefly introduce Ms. Lily Claire Bellamy. Ms. Lily Claire Bellamy is a Commonwealth Fellow, graduate of the University of the West Indies, Mona, and Cave Hill campuses with a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Laws degrees. She also holds a master's from Concordia University, Montreal, and was the first female international student to be elected president of the Graduate of Students Association. Ms. Bellamy is the executive director of the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, JIPO, and has extensive experience in intellectual property, health administration, environmental law, and has worked on gender and child development issues. It's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Bellamy today.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Lewis Marshall. It's my pleasure to join this important webinar today as we acknowledge and recognize the work of the University of the West Indies during this week of celebrations. I'd like to acknowledge the librarian, Dr. Paulette Carr, and my colleagues, Marcus Goff from the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, our Deputy Director and Legal Counsel, Shara Watson, the head of the Scientific Research Council, and Natalie Cortese from the University of the West Indies, Mona Law. Dr. Carr mentioned and alluded to the Technology Innovation Support Centers. I must highlight that the Technology Innovation and Support Centers is an initiative of the World Intellectual Property Organization, one which Jamaica has the signal honor to be the only English-speaking country in the Caribbean that has a Technology Innovation Support Centers. We have a service level agreement with the World Intellectual Property Organization that facilitated the establishment of Technology Innovation Support Centers here in Jamaica. Basically, what the reason behind a Technology Innovation Support Center is to facilitate access to online patent and non-patent resources. It also assists in searching and retrieving technology information, training in database searches, and general assistance in all things related to intellectual property rights. And it is the backbone of what can be used to enable researchers at the university and surrounding areas to have access to a wealth of information and knowledge. It is under the Technology Innovation Support Center program that the staff of the University of the West Indies, and in particular the library have been able to access the WIPO Academy and to do the courses that are offered at the WIPO Academy at no cost, because this is a part of the service level agreement between WIPO and Jamaica, which allows for the training of persons at technology innovation support centers to be able to benefit from this. Those who joined earlier may have heard the discussion between Dr. Watson and myself from the Scientific Research Council, because we're also in the process of working with the SRC to establish a TISC at the SRC. We also have had dialogue with a number of tertiary institutions here in Jamaica to establish technology innovation support centers on their campuses. Basically, we are the favored child in the region, and the other jurisdictions are all clamoring to establish TIS. So what we do and how we roll out the TIS will signal for the rest of the Caribbean how TIS can work to improve the research that comes out of our people, to allow them to be able to access information so that they don't utilize their time and resources in finding a solution to a problem that may have already been solved. But what this TIS does, it gives them the opportunity to build on existing research that is there and to come up with new and relevant solutions to problems that we have in our region, and also global problems that we could find solutions to. So the TIS enables this. Marcus Goff, Dr. Goff, who is the Deputy Director, Legal Counsel here at JIPO, he has a responsibility for the rolling out of the TISC in Jamaica. So if anyone is interested, then you could reach out to our office, and Marcus in particular, for the establishment of a TISC. I thank you for inviting and for continuing to partner with the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office as we seek to share the message of the importance and relevance of intellectual property rights protection in Jamaica and in our region. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Bellamy. And yes, quite a few library staff members have benefited from the WIPO Academy. And our next segment highlights some testimonials from staff members, how they think they've benefited, and how ultimately their level of awareness and ability to provide referral has increased. We have a short presentation.
I am Adrian Duncan, librarian at the Law Bench Library of the University of the West Indies, Mona Library, and I have been a participant in numerous training courses and sessions held by the World Intellectual Property Organization, as well as with the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office. These courses and training sessions were very incisive and stimulatingly rigorous, as they required me to intellectually scrutinize existing discussions and pre-existing knowledge on the topic of intellectual property and its core values, as well as appreciating the process for protecting one's interests and preserving cultural expressions through intellectual property. These courses and training sessions allowed for greater understanding and appreciation for traditional cultural expressions, noting that they are integral to the cultural and social identities of indigenous and local communities for the transmitting of core values and beliefs. Their protection is related to the promotion of creativity, enhanced cultural diversity, and the preservation of cultural heritage. In patent drafting, we were exposed to the fundamental knowledge and expertise needed to draft and file a patent application, allowing for the understanding and appreciation of the fundamentals for drafting claims and the specifications for drafting claims. The training sessions had and have equipped me with the requisite knowledge needed to strengthen and effectively function while supporting the work of the TISC Help Desk Initiative here at the University of the West Indies, Mona Library.
When I was selected to participate in the WIPO online distant learning course, I was elated. The training was beneficial to me as an individual, not only broadening my knowledge base on the topic, but knowing that I would be assisting students at the Mona Library IP Help Desk initiative, especially in the areas of securing their intellectual creation, sharing the knowledge and intricacies of the rights to their work, earning from their artistic innovation and scientific developments, whether collaboratively or individually. Sharing copyright information with students help them to avoid breaching the copyright law, especially when downloading and or copying from library resources, which carries a heavy penalty. Occasional refreshers training session would help in the dissemination of information at the TISC IP help desk. I also believe that while the training was relevant and beneficial, more involvement with practical situations would enhance the process for those who are expected to offer the services going forward.
Hi, I am Myrna Douglas, law librarian and head of the Law Branch Library at the Mona campus. Having participated in the rigorous 2014 Mona Faculty of Law WIPOS Jamaica Summer School and sat the DL 101 examination, sponsored by WIPO, JIPO, the UWI, and the Mona Library, over the last 2 years were timely upgrade to my knowledge and skill set. Just to mention a few, the WIPO JIPO Mona Library Certification course held June to August 2020 with final examination was a true test of my understanding of how to administer a TISC IP help desk. In this course, one of the takeaways involved prior art research, which is a critical step in the patent application process. This, I understand, helps the client to determine whether an existing patent is valid or if he or she is considering filing a new patent. Prior art research can help to find information that could question the novelty or the level of innovation. Of course, this kind of research would help the client to save time, effort, and money. Another training that I attended was the patent scope, the result list training, certified by WIPO's Global Database Division. This certainly was a bonus database search strategy session. I also attended the webinar on intellectual property capacity building for MSMEs, support institutions, and I received knowledge on how ecosystems work. I also attended the IP commercialization and tech transfer course, which of course assisted me to understand the importance of policies, rules, and laws in the operating environment, as well as the technology transfer in academic or research institutions. I attended also the JIPO Valuation Consulting IP course, which was sponsored by Valuating Consulting, JIPO, the Caribbean Development Bank, and Inter-American Development Bank, and Caribbean Complete. I just want to say thanks to stakeholders such as Ms. Lily Claire Bellamy, Dr. Marcus Goff of the Executive and Deputy Directors of JIPO, Ms. Carol Simpson, Head of the Caribbean Section in WIPO, the UWI stakeholders such as MEC, Maury, and Professor Daniel Kaur, and the Mona Library for all the groundwork they had put in so that I could be enlisted in the various training webinars and workshops, which enhanced my understanding of how to engage research, technology, and commercialization stakeholders within an institutional ecosystem with defined roles. Thank you so much for facilitating me.
Yes, so that was just 3 staff members who benefited, but this is certainly a part of the major of the role of the IP help desk to offer education and training. We are educated and ready, and we're hoping to reignite access to the IP help desk in the library in the upcoming academic year. We'll now have another presentation on building a strong TIS network by Dr. Marcus Duff, and I will briefly introduce him. Dr. Marcus Goff is Deputy Director / Legal Counsel of the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, JIPO. He's an attorney at law with over 20 years of experience in several areas, including IP law, entertainment law, media law, and human rights law. He holds a Bachelor of Laws degree from the University of the West Indies, a Master's of Law degree in Intellectual Property Law, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in law from Queen Mary University of London. Welcome, Dr. Goff.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and thanks to Dr. Carr and all of the other hardworking members of staff at the UWI Library and the UWI Help Desk and this team. Thanks for having us here at this important seminar. I want to also greet my fellow panelists, of course, Dr. Watson and Dr. Cortese.
Dr. Goff, you're a little low. I'm not sure if it's from my end. Yeah.
Maybe it's my end. Let me put in the microphone.
Okay.
The headphones will work better. Sorry about that. Sometimes it works without it. Hello, good morning. Is it better? Way better now. Okay, thank you very much.
Better.
All right. Okay, right. Okay, so I'll just go into the presentation and we can discuss a bit about the TISC, of course, and our journey with the TISC and with UWI. So again, thanks for having us here. I'm going to share a screen and upload my slides now. So hope you can see my presentation. So I'll be talking, as Jessica mentioned, on building a strong TISC network. And so, from our experience, both working in other organizations and, of course, learning from the experiences that we have had shared with us from other WIPO member states, there's certain things that we want to pinpoint about the TISC and just how we can maximize the opportunity that we have through it. So a bit about JIPO, of course. For those who may not know, JIPO was formed in 2001 by the JIPO Act and acquired a statutory body status on February 1st, 2002. The name of the ministry has now changed. It's the Ministry of Industry, Investment and Commerce, a recent change. And we are responsible for administering the IP laws in Jamaica, doing a fair amount of public education, as well as the registration of several IP rights as well. We also work with several interest groups, both in the private and public sector, and do a fair amount of policy development and IP legislative development as well. Maybe I could just clarify too that I am Deputy Director at JIPO and Legal Counsel. I'm actually not senior lecturer at UWI Mona, so as I heard. So just to clarify. So for us at JIPO then, we see IP rights as being fundamental to the whole area of being able to drive innovation and being able to benefit from creativity. We always say Jamaica is a very creative place and space and people. And so we are tasked and mandated to see how we can best empower persons to, again, maximize the benefits that are there from their creativity. So we talk about IP rights, we're talking about the legal property rights, which result from some intellectual activity, whether in the scientific, industrial, literary, artistic, musical, or dramatic fields. So any area of creativity and innovation that you find yourself in, or create and express, there pretty much is going to be an area of IP rights protection, legal protection for you within the IP landscape. So we can talk about creations of the mind, which then become property, which of course, provided it meets the required criteria, you then get legal protection and the legal space to be able to profit and commercialize your creativity. So IP rights then are important because not only do they incentivize persons, right? Persons wouldn't be incentivized to do research and to spend time and money developing new products or new ideas, etc. So they have the legal rights as the owners of or the creators of those forms of property that they and they alone can prevent unauthorized use or the right to authorize use and sale, commercialization, etc. of their intellectual property rights. And this comes with the right as well to compensation for infringement. And so it's really by virtue of the legal protection that are available that persons then get the, others say, incentive to be able to and to be motivated to spend on R&D, doing research, trying to find solutions to problems that require oftentimes a technical and/or scientific answer. So for IP, we can talk about the family of IP rights, as it were. We can talk about industrial property. This includes designs, patents, trademarks, and geographical indications. And of course, these are all, again, types of IP rights that allow the owners, the creators, to have some legal protection for their creations. We have copyright and related rights and traditional knowledge. And so these are all part of the family of IP rights that certainly we at JIPO are involved in and are part of the local landscape. So the TISC, as has been mentioned by Dr. Carr and Ms. Bellamy previously, really evolved out of a relationship with WIPO and JIPO, and both organizations really being tasked similarly to drive innovation and to expand IP registration as a means of development. And so we heard about this TISC initiative from WIPO, and we're very excited as JIPO to seek to get Jamaica and Jamaican organizations, institutions involved. And so for that, we then pitched this project to several local stakeholders, including UWI. And we were very pleased with the feedback that we got. And hence, we have been supporting UWI and others in Jamaica with the establishment of TISC centers. And again, for us, the aim being to assist persons who have creative ideas to be able to get access to information, to know how to strengthen their ideas, to maybe validate and evaluate those ideas. Of course, to assist in potentially having a path to market, right, through being aware of what else is out there in the marketplace. So that's one of the key objectives of the project, to be able to assist persons who are doing research, who want to do research, have an idea, but need some guidance regarding IP rights as to how to locate and get that guidance. So we oftentimes, as JIPO, support through training, as you've heard, through access to information, databases, etc. WIPO also assists similarly with research, data, and access to other member states as well, and what's happening there. And so it's really an opportunity to have in Jamaica an organized approach to innovation, to scientific research, and IP rights development that hopefully can lead to national development. And so that's our main objective as the focal point, JIPO, for this project. Under the project then, JIPO and WIPO support the establishment of these TISC centers at different locations. And I said the main objective being to provide access to information to potential innovators and inventors, and to stimulate increased innovation, inventions, and IP registrations by organizations and individuals in Jamaica. So at JIPO, our aim then is to build a network of TISCs around the island, that wherever you are in Jamaica, you will be able to have a TISC center near you that could facilitate your research endeavors, right? And so for that, the objective is to have facilities where persons will be able to access, again, assistance with IP questions, with IP queries, IP applications, and processes, based on the services being offered at the several TISC centers. So the first in Jamaica was established at the UWI in October 2019, and others that have also been established or in an advanced stage are UTEC Jamaica and also the University of the Commonwealth Caribbean. And so again, the objective of us in JIPA being to have this as a network across the island where we can, share information, we can assist with persons who are doing research, or we may channel them to where they can get the kind of assistance that they need. And so we have also been in dialogue with other tertiary institutions, primarily NCU, Edna Manley College, Michael University College, CASE, and most recently the SRC, to have TISC established there also. And so through this, again, we see that we can lift the innovative capacity of the country and the people, and have some personal as well as national growth and economic development. So for us, as a focal point, we want to ensure the long-term sustainability of the TISCs, to empower and assist the TISCs to provide appropriate high-quality technology and innovation support to as many people, industries, institutions, and members of the public as possible. And of course, through that, drive national innovation. We're looking to have, through this work and investment of time and energy, a resultant increase in number of patents being filed, not only patents too, but other IP rights as well, right? Patents, of course, being one of the primary focuses of the project because of technology, but not limited to patents at all. And to see increased IP registrations, improved IP and patent applications, increased commercialization, as I say, and of course, an improved innovation index for Jamaica. Something that, of course, as JIPA, we are quite keen on. In fact, we are still reveling right now in our Jamaica GII 2020 ranking. We ranked last year 72nd among the 131 economies in the GII 2020, and a very commendable performance. We were 21st among the 37 upper middle income group economies, and 7th in Latin America and the Caribbean for our innovation performance, right? And you see there, we have been improving since 2018 till now. And so that is also that we want to capitalize on, right? I think that we've been able to achieve this with maybe not as much, coordinated effort and input. And so if we have a more coordinated effort and input and, stronger TISCs operating in several hubs island-wide, we should be able to even see greater performances on the global innovation index. So last year it said that Jamaica performed best in creative outputs, institutions, but our weakest performance was in infrastructure and market sophistication. So again, this is very useful data to be able to assist to identify where our strengths are, but also where our weaknesses are. And we can then start to look at what kind of resources or policies, incentives we can put in place to plug some of these gaps, right? So there you see overall assessment of Jamaica's innovation strengths and weaknesses. And so, right, you see that it varies from having either starting a business, we rank very high in that, and number 6, right? Trademarks by origin, very high in that regard as well. But you see in terms of expenditure on education or strategic alliance deals, that's the commercialization aspects, we would want to be able to do more in those areas, right? Similarly, in terms of, global R&D companies and that kind of work, in terms of logistics performances, in terms of other areas of imports and so forth, compared to our local innovation outputs, we also can see some improvement with some more effort. And so, again, we see this TISC as being part of that whole trajectory toward national development. This is also from the GII 2020, shows again Jamaica in the circle there, performing above, based on this table, our inputs. So our outputs, they say, exceeded the expectations based on the inputs. And so again, that means that with some more effort, with some more resources, with some more coordination, right, both within TISC centers and at a national level, we should be able to, even reap more from our innovation investments. So for TISC, again, the network is important to be able to not only see what is being done in each institution, but to also see nationally where there can be coordinated approaches, right? There can be work that is being done between different organizations, different universities on common projects, or areas of national need and importance. And we would certainly want in the future to have a national steering committee of this that can assist in coordinating some of these things that, even though they may become competitive environments where we're operating, we still can see that there are areas that probably can be strengthened through cooperation. And so this is something that also through WIPO and JIPO, we aim to facilitate. So building strong TISCs. Ultimately, the basic necessary conditions required to achieve strong TISC and the outcomes of the objectives of the project are: one, to establish and strengthen the relationship between JIPO and the prospective TISC operators, and to engender knowledgeable and trained TISC staff to facilitate, assist, and advise TISC users. And finally, to develop strong partnerships and cooperation with relevant organizations in the public and private sector to facilitate broad-based awareness nationally of the existence and benefits of TISCs and widespread use of TISC across a wide range of sectors. Again, not only patents, but across the whole IP spectrum is what we are aiming for with TISC. We have certain guidelines that guide the function of the TISC, which again are geared to achieving success. And so it spells out, the role of JIPO and the host institution as the TISC host, as well as of WIPO in the process. Again, the aim being to strengthen capacity of each institution to be able to offer IP services, right? Whether IP searches and other IP evaluations, etc., to assist members of the public, primarily not only staff, but staff and students as well, primarily, but also the public to be able to do research and to get access to important IP data and information. And again, to be able to assist persons who have ideas, who have innovations that they want to explore, to be able to get assistance with research and or capacity building, primarily with an aim to commercializing those innovations. The MOA also speaks to ensure that invention disclosures are screened to ensure that the invention is novel. Again, so many times we see research being done in certain locations that is not necessarily cutting edge research because it's already been done overseas, sometimes years or decades before. And so doing appropriate research, being able to assess an idea from the outset in terms of its IP potential is critical as well for the success of the TISC. And for us at JIPO, of course, we want to ensure the long-term sustainability of the TISC. It's not only a short-term project, but a sustainable sort of integral intervention that can assist with, a more, structural change that can bring about some tangible results, again, for the institution, the wider public, and for the country. So the aim is really then to partner, as I say, with JIPO and WIPO and the institutions to develop these objectives. As Ms. Bellarmine said, there is quite an interest in the TISC centers in the Caribbean. Persons want to hear what Jamaica is doing and want to follow suit. And so I know that persons are knocking on WIPO's door to be able to have this access and facility as well. And so there really is not much that we ask of the host institution. I mean, there is of course investment in time, but not really per se necessarily, hopefully, any great financial outlay. We need to provide a space where persons can do their research and can maybe consult with staff, and to have staff being able to be available for training. As we've seen, UWI has done quite a bit of training of staff thus far, and essentially to commit to this sustainable objective through the proposed arrangements. So not to take up too much time, I just want to go to some of the services that are contemplated under the TISC agreement. So access to IP databases for patents and design, but also trademarks, copyright as well, skills training, search services, general information, assistance in providing freedom to operate analysis and surveillance of technology. Again, these are things that may or may not be done at each TISC, but are potentially what can be done under the TISC program. IP audits, IP license guidelines and advice on IP management and commercialization strategies. So these are all, again, what are the ambit, but it's up to each TISC to say what they will be able to do based on their local expertise in-house, and of course, what is the demand of their TISC. So the services can be varied, as I say, in terms of training, information, research, and other services, which can also, of course, be charged, not free services necessarily, although we do try to encourage them to be affordable, but not to be free. And so there can be some, generation of income through these services as well. So now the 2020 TISC report released by WIPO, it showed that Jamaica had 52 persons who had received training through WIPO programs and online courses, etc. And so most of those persons would have been UA staff. So that's very, very commendable, and we would like to see more of that as well, right? We also saw in 2020 that the kinds of services that are offered, kinds of training that's available also varied. I think for most of who did training here through JIPO, through UA, probably were in the area of patents, I believe, patent drafting, patent searches, etc. But there are a range of services that are available, a range of training topics that can be accessed through the TISC on copyright as well, IP management, software licensing, traditional knowledge, medical technologies, and other areas to, again, assist you in this endeavor. There is also the important eTISC platform that is also recently launched. Very, very useful. It's not open to the public. Once you are a TISC member, you can access it through our login credentials and have access to share information, contact fellow TISC hosts in other countries, near and far, and exchange, do projects, maybe some proposals together, etc. And so again, opening up a wealth of resources to you as a part of the TISC family. Finally, I just want to say about internal institutional coordination. It's important that the TISC is aligned with and supports the applicable intellectual property policy of the institution. The IP policy is, of course, established to provide guidance in relation to the creation, ownership, and commercialization of IP as created by staff and their students. And so there should be a coherent roadmap for IP creation and commercialization that fits in line with the IP policy, clearly outlines and facilitates the process for staff and their students to pursue and create relevant IP and to be supported in the registration, management, and commercialization of same. And so it's all important to, again, have the TISC functional where it's being used by members of the staff, by students, with some clear roadmap as to how they can see fruits at the end of the process for themselves and for the institution, right? So just to conclude, innovation is essential for increased GDP for any nation. The TISC network in Jamaica has immense potential, as we have seen from other countries and thus far for us here in Jamaica. Access to IP data and IP services is key for success. And so building a strong TISC and a strong TISC network is critical for Jamaica. And so in that regard, JIPO continues to work with other interested tertiary and research institutions to establish TISC island-wide towards the greater objective, as I say, of national development, increased innovation, increased IP registration, and increased national IP and innovation index for Jamaica. Thanks very much. Sorry to take a bit more time probably than I planned. Look forward to your questions.
No problem, Dr. Goff. That was a really insightful overview. It may have been a refresher for some of us, but also very informative in terms of the innovation index. Innovation and entrepreneurship are strategic issues for the UWI, and certainly the Mona Library, in collaboration with our stakeholders of MORI, who offer policy guidelines for IP, and MEC will be working with you guys to really push the network here. I'm going to open the floor to anyone who may have a question for Dr. Goff. We'll take a few questions right now. You can either indicate in the chat or simply unmute and go ahead. I see a hand up, Dr. Carr, please go ahead.
Dr. Goff, thanks so much. I mean, I certainly learned a whole lot about the workings of the TISC. I'm so interested though in those reports that came back from WIPO on the TISC. And so if you could explain that low score that we got for like infrastructure and sophistication, and there was something else there. If you could explain just a few, because you see, it's important to know the scores, but it's also important, how do we move ahead in terms of our innovation, and what can we do as the institutions that should be supporting the innovation and the output. Yeah, so I wanted to get a sense of what would take our scores up higher in terms of infrastructure and that market sophistication. And there was something else that I saw further down.
On this slide?
If you could explain. Yeah, on that same slide.
Okay.
But if you could explain those knowledge and experts, I think that was also high tech met. That was very low as well. Mm-hmm.
Right. So what the report really showed is that in terms of the institutions that were tracked as a part of the Global Innovation Index, we scored well in that regard. And so that means that the institutions are operating in a way in terms of offering support for innovation, so that would include JIPO and the SRC and the TISCs and the other institutions which are available, to support this kind of endeavors. So it would normally track institutions, including the tertiary, but also research institutions that would be part of the government sector as well. And so, yes, that is commendable in terms of that the institutions are functional and they're operating at a commendable level, in terms of knowledge. And what they also pinpointed was, you see there in the top chart, their technology outputs, right? Market sophistication and infrastructure, we did not do that well in those areas. And so that really relates to now our level of creative output in terms of products, right? So they're tracking as well how much technology we are actually putting out there, right? Of course, that's also something that is being tracked too. So while you're doing the research and doing innovation, in other countries, perhaps some other countries are more able to produce then technology products that would flow from their innovation and their patents, etc. So in that regard, I think that there's certainly more work for us to do, because while we have seen some increasing numbers in terms of IP registration and patent registrations, oftentimes what happens is that the IP rights are registered, but there's not much done thereafter, right? And so what that means is that then we would have a certain level of ranking up to that point, but then thereafter, because of a lack of products on the market and commercialization, right, of what we have, then we rank low in that regard, technology outputs. And similarly, I would say for market sophistication, in terms of commercialization, it's a similar concept that, in terms of now saying that, there are this cadre of Jamaican produced technology products or other IP-based products which are out there on the market, which are being tracked, which are being valued. There is need for more work in that regard. And so that's really for us to what we have recognized as well, that, there's a gap between, the IP registration and then the IP commercialization. And so I'm very glad that I heard a few persons from UE mention earlier the IP valuation training that we're doing right now, because we're trying to plug that gap by having this unique project in place right now, funded by the IDB and the CDB, where we're trying to get the IP valuation framework in place, where persons would be able to value their IP rights and to get a loan on the strength of those IP rights using the IP as collateral. And so we see that many times persons, don't commercialize because they don't have access to capital or financing to do so. But also, too, I would say, because they probably aren't acutely aware of how, of course, even without money, you can make substantial income through things like licensing your IP rights, right? So maybe you won't create the product itself, yourself, but you will license the rights to other person to create the product or products or to offer the services, etc., using your IP rights. And so that whole spectrum of commercialization is where I think we are probably weakest. And we need to do some more work in that regard, to bring the idea that we have to market, to be able to reap the fruits for both the creatives and for us as a country.
Thanks so much, Dr. Goff. I have another question. I don't want to hog the show, but your list of objectives for the TIS, I'm wondering if you were to highlight a few, because it was a long list, right? What would you share with us, and what happens in other jurisdictions that have had successful TIS? What would you say would be like maybe 4 of the areas that we should focus on to get things going in terms of undergirding our community? What are the areas that we should focus on, bearing in mind what happens in other jurisdictions?
Okay, Dr. Carr, thank you for that. Good question. So yes, this chart or this slide doesn't really show perhaps what you're asking per se, because many of these things will happen, through the follow-on effect, of certain things that we can do in the TISC. So the first thing I think, could be done would be to identify where are the existing research centers, on campus, since you have already market there on campus, and many persons are doing things there, whether in biochemistry or physics, engineering, or, any other areas, there are ongoing research that is happening there that, again, oftentimes from experience, we see is being done with a view to academic credentials, but not necessarily per se with a view to commercializing those patents for the inventors or for the institution. So if you could identify where this research going on, and maybe to check to see if those research centers or persons, staff, and their students, can be supported by any of the TIC services, whether they might want to do some research, they might want to know about how to register the IP rights or commercializing the IP rights. Similarly, that would be a very useful exercise, because sometimes when you wait on persons to come to you, persons who aren't necessarily aware of how IP fits in may not really be so keen, or see the importance of coming forward. And so, by virtue of more direct targeting, I think, and marketing to those who are doing research activities that could benefit from IP rights protection and management, it would be a very useful way to start the process. And then to see how you can work with them towards some of these objectives, in terms of registration, in terms of commercialization, of course, in line with the IP policy that speaks about ownership and sharing of ownership between staff and the university, and then trying to build around that, maybe some kind of plan of action, roadmap, or business plan, which again could be done after having consulted with more on the IP policy, maybe with MEC on that aspect, in terms of entrepreneurship and commercializing these ideas. And so that could also drive the research. Sometimes there's research out there that is available, that is desired to be done by international organizations, and they're willing to pay for it, And so sometimes we're doing research that sounds good to us and feels good, which is okay. But then there's also research that can be done that is targeted towards something that is a viable commercial opportunity. And so all of this is a part of looking at the business plan to see what can be done outside of what can be or is being done for the perspective of academia, what can be done on the context of commercialization again, with a view to making a profit from these endeavors, So I think be a good way. And then from that now will flow the registration and the commercialization, and then the increase in numbers and increase in the index. All these things will flow from that kind of approach. That's my thoughts.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Dr. Carr.
Thank you very much, Dr. Duff. I see Dr. McLaughlin's hand up. Please go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for wonderful presentations and for this lovely initiative. I would like to follow on some of the comments that Dr. Goff recently made in regards to the flow and the process and how we can strengthen the activities. For the members of the audience who may not be aware, the MONA Office for Research and Innovation is integrally involved in the process of many of the parts of the process that Dr. Goff alluded to. In particular, the process of registering IP. The beginning of the process occurs through the office at Mori, where we are integral in that part of the flow that speaks to disclosing IP that may be warranting protection, and many of the other steps along the way. And prior to that, when it comes to discussing research relevancy, providing support otherwise, is also available through the office in conjunction with the other stakeholders on campus. But I just wanted to make it clear that we do have these services available, and they have been availed by researchers and other members of the research community in the past and currently.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. McLaughlin. I think, yes, I think it's important, that when persons come or want to know where to go to, that they can have a kind of roadmap or, maybe a directory, that persons can know, what is being offered or what's available at, different locations, on the campus. So I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for that feedback and your questions. You'll notice in the chat, Ms. Harrison has dropped the contact email for the TISC and IP help desk. So if you have any follow-up questions or need any sort of referral, please feel free to contact us. So we'll be moving on with our program now, and we will be getting a presentation from Dr. Shara T. Watson on research, supporting innovation and driving development. I'll introduce Dr. Watson briefly. Dr. Watson is a multidimensional scientist, innovator, and entrepreneur. She is the executive director of the Scientific Research Council, Jamaica's principal agency responsible for fostering and coordination of scientific research and the promotion and application of its results. Dr. Watson received a doctorate in chemistry and a bachelor's degree in food chemistry and pure and applied chemistry from the University of the West Indies, Mona. In 2017, she received the prestigious recognition from the US State Department as one of the change makers in Latin America and the Caribbean, and was awarded a Young Leader of the Americas Fellowship. Welcome, Dr. Watson.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the opportunity to share with the group here this morning, as well as that very lovely introduction. So as you can see, I am 100% UWI bred. So this morning, I'll be speaking to you about research and the criticalness of research in supporting innovation and driving national development. I think we can all appreciate. I see Pamela hand is up. Pamela, is it a point for information now, or can I go ahead?
Pardon me, I just neglected to lower my hand. Sorry for the interruption.
No problem. All right, so research. So we're looking at research and the role that research play in driving innovation that will lead to development. So what is research? So depending on where you are, you will look at research differently or think about it differently. Whether you are in the typical sense, a scientist, a natural scientist, or social scientist, or a finance person, you might think of research differently. But research, simply put, is a calculated investigation that provides a basis for decision making. So I know most persons these days, we hear about, I'm going to do my research so I can make my own decisions and decide on what I want to do. So that's another type of research. We can argue whether or not it's valid or the outcomes from that research is valid. And I'm mostly referring to your social media research. No, but research nonetheless is doing calculated investigation that will lead to some form of decision making. And simply put, it is what we do when we don't know what we're doing. So research, no one can argue the criticalness or the importance or the value to research. So research, and I put in brackets here, and development, because research ought to be believed into something, and more times than not is towards development. It is absolutely critical to drive innovations. You cannot have innovation happening without research. Later on in the conversation, we will look at how we want to frame or define the innovations. It's critical for innovations, economic growth, and of course, national development. We have seen this played out in many countries, in many other spaces outside of where we are. We are seeing the criticalness of research in driving national development. There must be, however, a very strong synergy between government, academia, and industry. We like to call it public-private partnership and collaboration. It will be absolutely critical if you're going to get the outcomes that you want when we undertake various research activities. For research to yield practical fruits, the results must be aligned, must be enlightened and mold socioeconomic policies and be readily adaptable to the needs of society. So the research can happen anywhere, but in order for it to achieve its objective, it must be aligned. There must be alignment, and it must be applicable to the spaces that you intend to use the outcomes from those research activities. So research, it's well documented. There are well documented examples of strong relationship between innovation and economic growth. We can take Singapore as a good example. We like to draw on them because they were at one point in this identical position as Jamaica. And we have seen how a strong investment in research from a national level led to that country being in a position where they can be considered developed compared to Jamaica. And we have similar population size, similar circumstances, similar resources. We argue about the cultural differences, but nonetheless, there are many similarities that we can draw to that can show us exactly what could potentially happen if we are utilizing and investing heavily into research and innovation to drive economic growth. There's a direct positive connection between research and development, investment, and levels of economic development. The significance of research and innovation in attaining vital economic growth in developed nations has been resolutely recognized by a number of both theoretical and empirical studies. I made mention to Singapore. So for me, being a natural scientist, as you heard, I am a chemist by training and experience. I will look more on the natural sciences. So when we're talking about research from the context of the SRC, we're looking at basic versus applied research. There is always a debate whether or not Jamaica needs to be focusing, or economies similar to Jamaica need to be focusing on basic research versus applied research, where basic research is really aimed at discovery, new knowledge or new information and making predictions from those new knowledge, while applied research is really looking at technology development and implementation. Now, I believe that a country like ours or economies like ours cannot afford to not do basic research. And we also cannot afford to only do basic research. We must be doing a combination of both if we're going to be realizing the kind of impact that we want to achieve out of doing research. And the impact really is innovation, because that is where value is extracted. So I want to use use an example so we can bring it home to understand. So when you look at the discovery of elections in the 1800s, no one at that point in time knew that that discovery of elections would have led to us having this computer screen to use, having cell phones, and having X-ray or in any of the application. Matter of fact, the discovery of the elections was not done because we wanted to have these applications, was trying to find a way to make these applications that we were dreaming about possible. It came from something else. So if you trace back over 100 years, you realize the discovery of a single technology led to many others over the years, to the point now where from the discovery of those elections, you now have PCR testing being able to identify from the molecular level what an organism's presence or absence is in a sample. So we can see the basic research through the discovery of electrons in this case, leading to the development of a cathode ray electrode that led to the invention of a television, that led to imaging solutions such as the computer screen and the cell phones that we had, that also led to the discovery of the DNA molecule, that led to the development of technologies in PCR, and led to us understanding microorganisms and developing healthcare products and solutions to help advance our livelihood as well as quality of life. So research is absolutely critical, and we can also think about the value that is extracted from that. Another example, looking more from technology and healthcare, is the discovery of carbon and carbon structure and how they connect. Again, bear with me, I'm a scientist and I use any opportunity I have to show how the very technical and in-depth science apply to every aspect of your life. So the discovery of carbon molecules and how they react with each other and how they form led to the development of nanotechnology, same technology that is leading the forefront of not just electronics, but also medicines, talking about nanomedicines, talking about nanochips and different things like this. It's from that basic scientific research that led to those discoveries, leading up to technology development and, of course, innovations that is now happening. We now see the vaccines that are created using nanotechnology in it that is now creating significant wealth for those countries that are using this technology to implement those particular solutions across different aspects of life. So science today is a technology of tomorrow. So the work that we do today will be the technology of tomorrow. And if we do those basic research activities today and applied research activities today, it will be the technology that will be applied elsewhere tomorrow that you can extract those economic values from. So outcomes from research includes the development of technology, which is fundamental in altering the way people live, connect, communicate, transact, and has profound impact or effects on economic development. Science and technology are key drivers to development because technological and scientific revolutions underpin economic advances, improvements in health system, education, and of course, infrastructure. So right throughout life and what is required to live, you realize science and technology play key roles in driving the advancement and development of every aspect of our lives. So it brings us now to innovation. And I think this is where I think it came out very strongly in Dr. Goff's presentation. This is where we're possibly weakest in. So with the program at UWI and being a graduate of UWI, I can attest to us having strong research programs in place and have a lot of creativity, a lot of ideas, and we are finding potential. We're making discoveries that could potentially become very valuable, that can become innovations that are applicable to us here in Jamaica, to us in the region, as well as could have global application. When you think about majority of the research work coming out of the science and technology faculty, it's heavily based on diabetes research or healthcare or translation of Jamaica's natural or endemic plants in creating value-added products or therapeutic products. However, this is not a space that Jamaica is known for, because you're not seeing products coming out and being able to perform on the global scale or even in the country to create jobs or have an impact on the economy. And this is where innovation, we're lacking in terms of doing enough to be innovative and having innovations. So innovation is a process of translating an idea or invention into a good or service that create value for which customers will pay. The critical part that we are missing is the for which customers will pay. So we'll either go as far as creating the goods or the service, but getting it into the marketplace is where we're having the most challenges. And this is somewhere I believe we need to focus on in terms of building out the ecosystems so that we can benefit from the research and innovations that are happening here. I don't believe we have a problem in terms of research or creating products or coming up with ideas. We have a problem with creating or having customers see the value in what we are creating. So innovation, as Steve Jobs said, distinguish leaders from followers. So currently, I believe we are following, and it's not just my belief, is what we can demonstrate, we can show. When you look at the research and development, with the investment in terms of research and development that we are currently doing, we're at about 0.06%. And you realize that, as Marcus indicated, we're getting higher level of output from what we're inputting. So we know to turn our hands and make fashion. So while there's much more to desire in terms of support to R&D activities for development, we are able to somehow extract as much as we can from the little that is being put in. And the external evaluation is demonstrating that. What we are seeing is this particular slide. This is coming from the UNESCO Science Report of 2021. I believe this was published in July of this year, but I can be corrected, but it's definitely a 2021 report. You see the number of patents that were submitted to this IP5 related to the US Patents Office. How many patents originating out of Jamaica that were submitted to the US Patent Office? We're looking at the CARICOM picture. If you realize Barbados is in a different school by itself, but it's not necessarily reflective of the innovations or inventions that are happening there. Because as you realize, a lot of foreign companies do register their IP in our countries, Barbados being one of the most attractive for several reasons, Barbados and Bahamas. But for Trinidad and Tobago and Jamaica, significant number of these patents are actually from innovations or inventions that were created here in these particular jurisdictions. So we're not doing badly, 128, but what is the economic impact of that in the country? I'm not sure if we're able to measure that. This is another area that there's significant weakness in terms of being able to collate the data and get the information that we can actually track the dollars and cents. And when I say cents, I mean this kind of cents and not that kind of what is happening. Then you look at the high-tech exports as it relates to manufacturing exports. Jamaica here, again, is performing, while we're looking above other countries, we are performing extremely low in this particular area. And when you look at resident patent applications, again, Jamaica is performing above most of the other countries, except for Antigua and Barbuda, which would have different things leading to that, which is mainly from external countries or external companies from the countries registering their IP in those countries. So we see we are not far off in terms of creating the new knowledge and translating those knowledge to potential innovations that can realize economic impact on our society. but something is missing, something is critically missing. And I believe what it is having a fully thought out ecosystem that allow entrepreneurs, businesses to set up in Jamaica, do their business in Jamaica, so that majority of that income can be realized in Jamaica. There's something missing there, and one of the things that I'm very proud of, that we have finally got to a stage where we might be seeing implementation within this year, fingers still crossed, is the development of our STI policy. The latest draft was completed in July 2021, and it's now before Parliament or Cabinet for review, for acceptance and implementation. Now, you realize that the government do appreciate the value of investment in science and technology and research and development. And currently, we are projecting to have an increase from 0.06% of GDP to up to 1.5%, which would bring us more comparable to what the more developed countries are doing in terms of their investment in research and development. In the US, Germany, the Scandinavian countries, you realize their investment in R&D is upwards of 3%, and in some cases even 4% of GDP, while we were minuscule at 0.6%. So if we're able to do as much as we have with 0.6% investment, can you imagine what 1.5% of our GDP being invested in R&D would look like? You can see where this would definitely have an impact on the development of our ecosystem for sustainable development and to drive economic development of the country. So the policy should enable Jamaican scientists and engineers to be able to undertake critical scientometric data and link research effort to socio-economic needs by aligning them to national development goals. We also should be able to retain more of our scientists and engineers and have them executing their activities more here. We should be able to tap into these highly specialized areas of expertise locally versus sending out those income external to Jamaica. So this is a key area that the policy focus on, that we anticipate will have a significant impact. And the activities in investing in innovation for growth and development has already started. You see several programs being promoted by the Development Bank. One of the more recent one is the Biggie program, which looks to pump $3.1 million into the economy to support entrepreneurs in specific areas, which will really looking at high value innovations that will help to drive more patents being submitted and more products being created that can have the kind of impact that we anticipate. So I already mentioned the need for there to be appropriate framework in place from the national level to drive innovation and investment, as well as that will lead to the kind of environment that we need in order for us to have the impact that science and technology can have. So I mentioned the STI policy, and this is now in line with the Vision 30 priorities. And if you look at Vision 2030, it looks at technologically enabled society, particular outcome number 11, where we integrate science and technology into all aspects of our development. And we, being the SRC, being one of the implementing agencies, this is a framework or a guide that we use in developing our programs to ensure that there is alignment, that SRC is undertaking the high value or the kind of research activity that will lead to commercialization of our research or innovation, that there is alignment with the STI to solve national problems in industry, environment, and society, and to ensure that we are doing our part to help to establish a dynamic and responsive national innovation system. So with that, I just want to move very quickly to kind of give some idea of what it is that we're doing at the SRC, what our role is at the SRC and how we're supporting the national ecosystem as it relates to innovation for national development. So the SRC was established through the SRC Act in 1960. So we're celebrating 61 years of being in existence. And since those 61 years, we've been really looking at impacting national development through science, technology, and of course, innovation. So the SRC does several things, but our main mandate, as mentioned, is to foster the development of scientific research, be a repository for scientific information, and facilitate the development, application, and transfer and/or improvement of technology of such research for the benefit of all Jamaica. We also play a critical role in the promotion and popularization of science as well as science education. We are an enabling organization. We'd like to say we are facilitators. We try to enable the creation of new industries and encourage the encouragement of technical processes for the cooperative basis of all stakeholders involved. So some of the things that we focus on is scientific discoveries for both basic and applied, technology development and transfer, commercialization activities in support of small, medium, small, and micro enterprises, and of course, looking at research and development to create or improving products. So our broad areas of focus include support to micro, small, and medium enterprises, research, development, and innovation, and science education and popularization. So we try to ensure that our programs are in alignment with both Vision 2030 as well as what our role is in implementing the SDI policy. So these are some of the broad focus areas of the Scientific Research Council. So we consider ourselves to be an enabler of national growth. Some of the key things that we do is look at exploiting our natural resources, specifically plants. We know Jamaica have a very rich biodiversity, especially in our plant flora. So we look at exploiting those natural resources to stimulate economic activities by creating jobs in the manufacturing and agricultural sector, promote non-traditional exports, facilitate import substitution, and of course, support to small, medium, and micro enterprises. So just to very succinctly, just to highlight how we have been able to do this by just sharing with you maybe two of the projects that we have undertaken in the past that we can relate to. We know Jamaican ginger and the value of it. It is the only ginger that is referenced in the European Encyclopedia of Ethnomedicine. So Jamaican ginger and a lot of Jamaican crops, because of where we are geographically, have unique properties and characteristics that set us apart from other plant material. Our coffee is one such as well. Now, ginger, unfortunately, severely affected by ginger rot disease that almost totally disseminated our ginger products. And you might not realize, but majority of the ginger that you're getting, yes, it might be grown locally, but most of those are coming from an imported stock, China ginger, those big, giant, fat, juicy, beautiful ginger that don't have no flavor. These are not the native Jamaican ginger. These are really either Hawaiian ginger or Chinese ginger that our farmers are growing out, because those ginger are either resistant or tolerant to the disease that is affecting our native ginger species. So the SRC through partnership has been undertaking research activity to look at creating either resistant or tolerant strains. So on the second slide, is seeing the impact. In 2016, fresh ginger sale was over 574 billion. I can tell you in years that passed in the early 2000s, Jamaica was a primary producer for ginger. We were the primary producer for pimento. We were primary producer for several crops or spices that the Jamaican product has a unique high value profile that the market wants. And since then, in most of these instances, and in the case of ginger, You look at where we went from exporting over thousands of tons to being able to export even 1,000. So you can see the economic impact. This is an industry that is over 574 billion. Can you imagine if the entire country was around ginger production and we're undertaking work to ensure that we secure this particular high value crop, where we could be in terms of income to the country. So this is the kind of impact that research can have. So the SRC, through its research activities, applied research activities, is developing strains of Jamaican ginger that is either resistant or tolerant to these diseases. Once we're successful in this, we can look at revitalizing the industry, and we can now see a value coming in that will have a direct impact on our GDP and our economy. So these are the things that we're looking at. Sorrel is another example. We used to only have sorrel at Christmas time, but now you have sorrel all year round. Why? Through research activities of the SRC, we looked at different aspects, looking at the particular crop of sorrel, how to produce it, as well as storage conditions for the sorrel. You can go in a supermarket and get it all year round. And this is because of activities, research that is leading to the creation of value added or adding expansion on the possibility of a particular industry. Lemongrass is another one. Castor oil is another one. I pick out these that we are all familiar with. And these are ones that I know both Jampro and Jaipo has been working on, have done a lot of work on in supporting the creation of value added industries from. And these are all products that Jamaica has a unique value on in terms of the quality of these products, and that are multi-billion-dollar industries that we can tap directly into if we're able to create the knowledge or the information required to support these activities. So just to wrap up, we know that there are global challenges that are not unique to any particular jurisdiction or any particular geography, that through research and development, we can have an active role in playing. We look at the main global challenges. Climate change is affecting everywhere. Pollution, hunger, food security, malnourishment, safety and social welfare, poverty, health and wellness, corruption, gender equality. These are all global issues that we can find solutions to. When you're thinking about Silicon Valley in the US, why is it that Jamaica don't have a Silicon lane or Silicon community, a similar kind of setup? We are able to develop these technologies. Once you have a smartphone, you can develop an app. Once you have a computer, you can develop an app. We have the tools to do it. Silicon Valley can exist anywhere in the world, but somehow it is not in Jamaica for some reason. Now, when you think about the potential that research and innovation can have, I like to draw on Tesla as a good example. Just Monday night, I was reading and I saw Tesla now being valued in the $1 trillion club. And it's very few companies ever get there, very, very few. And when I saw Tesla, who is relatively new, just 11 years old, surpassing Toyota. When I say surpass, I don't mean like just edge them up. Toyota is valued just about 230 billion. And Tesla is now valued at 1 trillion. Why? How come? And this is from the thought and the ambition of one man who had an audacious dream. One man who was born in South Africa. And yes, his family might have had a different experience, but he was not coming from a space, his mind was not coming from a space that minds here in Jamaica or the region cannot come from. Why is it that we are not allowing ourselves to have these kind of dreams and visions? There's something that is preventing us from having that. There's something that is causing us to only think about the low-hanging fruits. It's a common term that we use, and it's a term that I want us to deviate from. Let's not look at the low-hanging fruits, because those fruits tend to have a lot of worm. Let's go up in the top of the tree to pick the prettiest East Indian mango in the top of the tree. So I want us, this is my last slide, I want to leave us with thinking about the black, green, and gold unicorn. Let us have those audacious dreams and vision of where, like Elon Musk, of where we can take Jamaica and how we can really come up with innovations that can impact the world. Let's move it outside of our shores, but we want to be able to value it in Jamaica. So it could be our next Black unicorn could very well be mobile technology. It could be healthcare products because we're doing a lot of research in that area. It could be beauty and wellness. Our castor oil, I can tell you, Shea Moisture is extracting a lot out of Jamaican black castor oil. They have a whole range of products that is branded as such, Jamaican black castor oil. This is not a Jamaican company. And I don't know what, if anything, Jamaica is getting from that, if they're even using Jamaican black castor oil. And what about our intellectual capital? Could that be it? Could it be that we train the intellects and export them? Is that something that we want? Is there a value in that? So, ladies and gentlemen, those are my thoughts for now. And I invite questions at this point. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watson. That was a really great journey through research and supporting innovation and driving development. As you said, a few questions at this time. You can either indicate in the chat or simply raise your hand and we can address those quickly. Okay, so if there are no,
I just have one comment. Well, maybe it's a comment, it's a question. I'm not sure. Dr. Watson, excellent presentation. Thank you so much. It was really, really, really good. I was wondering though, how do we start? Not so much at the tertiary level. What can we do to engender what you want from us in Jamaica to get to that Silicon Valley, or as you say, a Silicon Lane, or a little just a pathway? I think it has to start earlier because we do have a mindset of having our own business, you know. Yes. Everybody wants to do it in Jamaica, but because our children will sell things in high school and so, but we don't have the mindset of innovation, of moving it beyond that. So how do you see that happening so that we move the conversation to another level?
Right. So what you're referring to is creating that culture of innovation, and any cultural shift or change that you want has to start from as their birth, as they come out the womb. You want to start that. So the engagement has to begin from as early as you can capture them. And this is one of the things that we have identified as a SRC, and I am happy to say as a Ministry of Science, Energy and Technology as well. So one of the critical components of SRC's mandate and programs that we implement is the popularization of science. So that continuous engagement of the youth. Initially, our focus was on primary and high school. We have gone now to the basic school level. So we are now having those engagement with 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, to create that culture of innovation, to create that culture of identifying a problem. But the second thought after identifying the problem is to start thinking solution. So we are developing strategies, developing programs that we are partnering with different entities, different individuals in different aspects of society to implement. So this is now a structured part of SRC's popularization initiative, as well as that of the Ministry of Science, Education, Science, Technology, and Energy portfolio in terms of creating that culture of innovation. When you're thinking about culture, it's not just from an academic perspective, but there are social aspects to consider. So building those partnerships, identifying the strategies. The STI policy also speaks to the creation, having a culture of innovation created. So from the fundamental level in terms of policy and government intent and framework, we're looking at it from there right through. So we're trying to ensure that we play our part as one of the implementing agencies. So I hope I answer your question, but it's something that we all have to partner
Yes, you
in
did.
on.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much.
Alicia was first. I saw Alicia Palmer's hand first, and then Daniel Core. So Alicia, you could go ahead, please.
Thank you. My question is, does the SRC have a set of tangible resources or toolkit available that can be shared to promote technology innovation in education specifically?
Yes, we do. One of the programs that we have going on now is our STEM Ambassador Program, where we actually engage different professionals in various fields, in the STEM field, where they actually engage our students at different levels and lend partnership to schools in terms of moving it from an academic perspective to one that is real and relatable. So we have our STEM Ambassador Program, and within that program, we have tools that we use to train these professionals in terms of science education and translating. So we have resources that are available that we develop our support team that are external to the SRC. We also have our various innovation and invention competition, and one of which is the Young Inventor Innovator. And a part of that competition is having an ideation session or ideation sessions. And to facilitate those sessions, again, we have resources that we utilize that can be translated or transferred to other spaces, or can be used to help in terms of building or helping person to do that brainstorming and come up with ideas based on issues that they're around. So yes, we do have resources that can be shared and that we can definitely partner with those that are willing to help to create this culture of innovation to get the kind of impact that we want. Daniel, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation, especially towards the end. I found it very stimulating. I have tons of questions I could ask you about the ginger and how, if we're conserving that, and how we might go about deploying that. But what I wanted to confine, I recognize we're short on time, so I'm going to confine the question that I had in terms of the question you asked about why we don't have a silicon something lane or what have you. One of the key ingredients of a Silicon Valley, a successful one anyway, is the engagement of the private sector. I hate to use the term private sector because it's so broad, but it really is a collected set of industries driven by private finances that are essentially coming down to individuals who own companies, have a particular need, and see how research is going to help them solve that problem. And they're willing to back their, who they can reach, and put that money into that as part of that investment. That is actually one of the key ingredients that's missing from our ecosystem in Jamaica. Our private sector tends to, it's not that they don't have the need, but there's, for various reasons, it might be a lack of confidence in what we can produce locally. They might not be aware, various reasons. And so the question really is, as a major part of that, even in the framework that you identified for how we're going to transform or improve the degree of innovation that we see, I see where an engagement from our private sector, both from basic investment at a basic research level, but even from their own, most likely they're going to be driven by their personal, let me call it selfish needs, but it's okay. That's what they're there for.
That's fine.
It's to make profits for their shareholders. So even if they're driven by that and therefore focused on the applied sciences, what do you see as perhaps mechanisms that we might incorporate both into that framework, as well as perhaps other kinds of initiatives to help or increase that engagement?
So it's a multitude of approaches that will be required, but I'll speak to one, especially because I know JIPO is here and I know what they have been working on in that regard. Research and development is high risk in terms of when you see that return, and even when you do create IP or intellectual property, it's very hard to shop that and to get the support from private sector for the implementation. because you realize for the most part when we're developing IP, the consumer for the most part are not fully engaged or considered. We know there's an issue, we know there is a solution that we have come up with, but how do you get it for consumers to realize and want to pay for that solution? That is where we have a significant challenge. And where private interest comes in, they are not willing to take a risk on something that they themselves might not even fully understand. So that is something that we're looking at through JIPO leading the initiative, is how do we value IP? How do we put a value on it that will attract private interests that we can use as something that can get funding support on to assist with the implementation? That is one of the areas from a fundamental perspective that we have to find solutions to. Especially in the local landscape. External to Jamaica, there are other spaces where IP is actually valid and you can raise funds from your IP. Currently in Jamaica, you're not able to do that. Just not yesterday, but the day before, Tuesday's newspaper, you would have seen that Dr. Lowe had sold his Jamaican Ginger company. And that company was created in 2013. They didn't report how much the company was sold for, but what that company did was focusing on developing cannabis-related health products. They had challenges they were able to enter the market space, but they had challenges in growing, right, to realize, but they were able to create value and to demonstrate that value to some regard. So they could have attracted private interest who, based on report that was in the paper, is pumping in at least $100 million US in the first 5 years in support of the value that they see in this cannabis company. So we can have many more stories like that. Again, here at the SRC, we recognize that we are not capable to commercialize the innovations or the inventions that we come up with. We realize we don't have the skill set or the capacity to do that. So what we do, we try to partner with external private interests and other interests. It's a similar approach. We need to recognize where our strengths are, where the weaknesses are, and develop a framework that will facilitate ease of private sector. We know what private sector want. They want to reduce their risk exposure. They want to be able to quantify the return on their investment. We need to be able to communicate in that way and to demonstrate the potential of our research and our innovations in that way if we're going to get the buy-in that we need from private sector. And of course, we need to build confidence. For some reason, we will take an app, even if it's the same app, once it have once it's originated outside of the island, more than we'll take the same app if it was created in Jamaica. So that mind shift, that anything from foreign, even if foreign is a boat away, 90 meters away, is better. Most persons were talking about taking the Cuban vaccine. I'm sure if we had a Jamaican vaccine, you'd hear most people say they don't want it. They would rather take the Cuban one. So there's also, again, it comes to the cultural change. Because if we have a culture of innovation, then when things are created here, from a cultural perspective, we'll have confidence in it and we'll have greater buy-in and take-up of those innovations created.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watson. I see a question in the chat. Is this a program that the government or private sector and universities will be pushing? I think that was in regard to the IP valuation initiative.
Being led by JIPO, and JIPO being a government entity, and they are having strong support from the SRC as being maybe the test dummy, the pilot phase in terms of looking at the IP that are here at SRC and getting those evaluated. One of the beautiful thing is Lily Claire Bellamy is one of our directors here at the SRC. So that's strong collaboration and partnership. So we're looking, it's a government initiative, us being government agencies and seeing the value and seeing the criticalness of it. Yes, so I would say yes, it's a government-led initiative, us being government agencies pushing that agenda.
Thank you so much, Dr. Watson. You sparked a lot of conversation. We're going to forge ahead with our program. and I am going to briefly introduce Dr. Natalie Cortesy, who will be speaking to us about branding. And it's been indicated that branding can really help to take innovations to profit. So Dr. Cortesy holds a PhD in commercial law from CCLS Queen Mary University of London and an LLM in IP law from the University College of London. She's also qualified to practice as an attorney of law at law in Jamaica. She is currently Associate Dean at Mona Law at the University of the West Indies Mona campus, and she is also the Program Coordinator for the faculty's LLM in IP and the Cultural and Creative Industries. Welcome, Dr. Cortesy.
Hello, good morning. Are you hearing me well? My internet connection is not the best. And
We are hearing you, Dr. Cortesy.
Oh, wonderful. So I'm going to ask in advance for your patience. I don't think that if I switch my video on, I'm going to be able to remain online. So with your permission, I would prefer not to turn the video on and risk losing our connection. So first of all, I want to congratulate you on really a fantastic start to celebration of Library Week. I had a very wonderful time tuning into your opening with celebration of books earlier. And I think this is just a fantastic initiative. I certainly am a firm believer that without strong library support, I mean, academics would certainly not be able to do the things that we are able to do. And so it is indeed my privilege to be a part of this panel today, but in particular to share my views, some views on branding alongside my colleagues, my IP colleagues, Leclerc and Marcus. So I suppose the first thing that comes to mind when I think about branding and IP is the extent to which in the university context, we can at a very personal level begin to think about individual branding and monetizing that. I think it's actually a lesson I learned from my children, that when we are on a path to creating something of value, creating a good, a product, a service that we would like to publicize, hopefully to receive some economic returns in respect of, we're not quite clear on how the branding should work. And in fact, we build the branding as we go along. And I think a lot of us, in fact, create an inventory of IP through branding, and we don't even really realize we're doing it. What do I mean by this? Imagine that you have an invention that you have just put together. It might be the sort of creative output that is a book on another copyright type level, and you want now to launch off to make connections with others. The first thing I would say is buy your domain name. Your domain name is the first point that will give you visibility, not just with peers, but in your wider academic circle, nationally, regionally, and internationally. It is one of the most valuable pieces of branding tools that you will ever possess as a creative. It is your domain name. When you do that, let's say that you choose a supplier like GoDaddy, very simple, not overly expensive, I would say. They offer you the opportunity to perhaps purchase an email associated with the domain name that you have chosen. And you will discover that if you say, purchase this email that incorporates your name and the domain name, that if you give it up, they'll actually try to sell it back to you for $100, $200, and unbeknown to you, through this very simple branding tool of a domain name, which gives you access to the international World Wide Web, and a personalized email, which helps you with your digital identity, you have created significant value that only increases as you go along. It offers you an opportunity to populate the website with information about your invention, to write blog posts related to how this invention is impacting, or if it is an artistic creation, it's an opportunity to perhaps upload short videos, to upload a short narrative that's read. This is increasingly popular because now persons who are visually impaired can access your work, and they can quite easily become a part of your story. And by engaging in this online way, they post it to their Instagram, they post it to their social media, and before you know it, there's a huge buzz that's happening around your intellectual property that you started by simply purchasing your domain name, personalized email where people can contact you, and all of a sudden you have got this visibility. So I would say that when I think about branding and innovation and technology, there is a very basic, simple step that every single person has access to at a very small, relatively small cost. And that is about managing your online media presence, creating content, managing the content. So that would be the first thing I wanted to share. The other thing that I wanted to share about branding is that there is an enhanced opportunity for co-branding with the country name Jamaica. In June 2021, there was the passage of the Trademark Amendment Act, which incorporates, I would say it codifies a practice that had been ongoing for many years between JIPO and the Office of the Prime Minister of managing the use of the country name Jamaica when associated with registrations for trademarks. And as you know, your trademark is a sign capable of graphic representation that you can get the monopoly to use in trade if you go to JIPO with it and there is none other, and you meet all the requirements and they accept to give you this trademark for this sign, then you are able to use that sign on all of the related goods and services to which it will attach regarding your innovation or your artistic output. You now have this trademark associated with it. And the function of the trademark is to act as an indication of origin, so that when people see your trademark, they will automatically associate those goods and services with you as the person who has come up with it. So when we talk about trademark and the value of the trademark to an undertaking, to an inventor, to the author of a book, we're most times talking about the most valuable thing that they have got in that IP toolkit or in that IP inventory. And if I take any trademark at all, if we look at the business of a Coca-Cola, or we think about the Tesla that was mentioned, I am almost certain that the most valuable asset on that balance sheet is likely to be the trademark. Not the buildings, not the cars, not the people, the trademark. So a very, very important tool, because it offers the owner of the trademark an opportunity to tailor make how they would wish for the goods and services to be viewed by people in the marketplace. It gives an opportunity for persons to test everything that they have been told in this public relations output about what they've been told about your goods and services, and to confirm for themselves, this is truly a great product. This is truly a great idea. I want to be a part of this project. Where do I sign up? Oh, here's the personal email. Oh, here is the website. Let's get connected, right? So the co-branding with Jamaica, as I started out saying, has this enhanced protection now in this new legislation. And what it says is that you are able to give a very special touch and feel to whatever it is that you are wanting to do with your IP creativity. And I'm of the view that there is value in co-branding with Jamaica rather than trying to brand in a neutral way, because oftentimes what transpires is that we're very good at trading in raw materials. So Jamaica will sell its chocolate, its Crayola, very rare chocolate, Criollo chocolate that's only grown in certain parts of the world in small quantities. And we will sell it simply as chocolate. And suddenly we're asked to pay 100 times the price when we buy it back as a Godiva chocolate. Or, I don't know, 100 times the value of it when we're asked to buy it back as Swiss chocolate, right? And so what we want to aim to do is that as we go about thinking of developing these products and developing these technologies, is to lean into the value that can be associated with co-branding with Jamaica, because it sets us apart. We're not just another company, we're not just another startup. This is the reason why we think of something very specific in our minds when we think about a California startup and we think about a California tech company. When we think about Apple, it almost encompasses California and the ethos of a California. And so we want to ask ourselves, how do we tap into that identity that is uniquely Jamaican, that is reflected in what we have to offer, because there is value in that. And so that would be the second point that I wanted to offer. So thinking of branding on a personal level, and then I'm saying thinking of branding in a co-branding national level to leverage in an international market where you are in fact seeking to distinguish yourself from global competitors. And I would share that there's a very interesting training going on now. I've been privileged enough to be a part of it. It's being run by WIPO and UE. So colleagues across the different campuses have been participating in this WIPO Blue Economy Innovation experiment and trying to get colleagues to interact with each other and to really sort of have a crash course into thinking outside of the box of what kind of apps would we come up with that we think would be helpful to promote our blue economy. So a crazy idea that sounds totally impossible, that just maybe technology could actually bring it into being. And I think this is a very important lesson for me, and I want to share it with those of us listening in today. It's that almost everything that we know as a truly innovative idea that has changed our lives and brought it forward in terms of technology started out as something that was conceived as totally crazy, impossible, and just it couldn't happen. And so I want to leave with this thought that creativity really is a gift, and we really do have the tools to take it to the next level. And I'm very glad that in collaboration with JIPO, with WIPO, with the library, we're now able to tap into resources that can help us to turn these crazy dreams into something really, really real and fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cortese. Those are three really valuable points that you shared with us. Personal branding, the co-branding with Jamaica, which is something that I think has immense potential, and the Blue Economy Innovation Experiment. I'm going to open the floor now for questions for Dr. Cortese. Please raise your hand or put a note in the chat.
Mrs. Lewis Marshall, if I may.
Yes, Dr. Carr.
Dr. Cortese, thank you so much. I think it was on Tuesday that the library had a panel about the use of social media. And I hear you, and we had a presentation from a graduate of UE actually, who spoke to, especially for academics who get a little sort of closed in, and I think maybe for more than academics, we get closed into like professional platforms for promoting our work or as academics, but not utilizing the stories of what we do, so that it's not just we talk about or CVs, or we put up even a book that we have done. but to relate that to and to make that more interesting with the stories that we are sharing on the platform. And one of the things that I got from your talking about branding on an individual personal level is really managing that content in real ways. And you did talk about stories, and I wondered how, for your own in terms of your own, the material that you have published, your intellectual property, how did that work for you?
Okay, so very interesting story indeed. I think I need somebody to help me manage my social media. I'm terrible at it, but I have tried. So when I published my first anthology of poems in 2017, a book of poems called Fried Green Plantains. The graphic designer who did the cover sent me the mock-up of it with a domain name on it, www.nataliecortese.com. And I said, well, what's this? It doesn't exist. She said, well, why doesn't it? And I thought, oh my goodness, I never even thought about that. And so since then, I have been, I actually did it myself. And so I determined that I wanted to have two separate presences. I wanted to have one to promote the book in particular, and that I wanted to use the website with just Natalie Cortese to look at everything that was my professional persona. So it has photographs, it has a sort of bio, it has links to various publications, and that can be tricky and an interesting point for library and repository, because I remember publishing in a very prominent journal, and I wanted to share it. And I said, well, let me have a look. And it was something like 60 US for an overnight read. So I wasn't even in a position to connect persons visiting my website to reading my work unless they had gone through this 60 US dollar process. So it's been quite a journey doing that. And the anecdote I shared about the email is absolutely true, because I had initially paid for my email address, natalie@nataliecortese.com, and I thought, oh, it's just, I can't be bothered paying for that. I don't really need it. And I didn't renew it, and then they offered to sell it back to me for about $200. I was astounded that I didn't know I was sitting on money, and I gave it up. So I have discovered that there is a need to tune into a number of different social media platforms depending on your objective. So my 12-year-old was trying to convince me I needed to go on TikTok, and I wasn't brave enough to do it. And he said, Mom, I will do it. And so he took a photograph of my collection of poems and he put it up, and one silly little thing with the photograph, and it had, I am not kidding you, it had about 300 views in a half an hour. I was astounded at the reach of this thing. And then I also went on Clubhouse. So Clubhouse is a relatively new app, and the format is in by way of radio. So there's no video, but you can be heard on Clubhouse. I was invited by the Jamaica Book Club. And what I liked about Clubhouse is that they've got groups on there for everything under the sun. They've got groups for inventors, they've got groups for animators, they've got groups for scientists, they've got groups for academics, they've got groups for, I don't know, sex experts, they've got groups for parents of children with autism. Anything you can imagine under the sun, they've got a group there hosting rooms where you can go in and talk and do promotion and do branding. You can host events yourself. What was interesting to me about this app was that when it started, you could only join Clubhouse if you were invited by someone who was already on Clubhouse. And they had to change that because the technology was such that they had completely isolated people with Android. So after a while, they adjusted the algorithm to allow Android. The other thing that I found interesting was that you were not able on Clubhouse to have private messaging between persons when you were in the room and the discussion was going. And by way of responses from the people who were on Clubhouse, they managed to tweak the algorithm to allow that to happen as well. And so what we've seen is that Clubhouse has in fact surpassed TikTok in popularity recently, I'm told, if the news is to be believed. And they have done phenomenally well by using this technology for personal branding. So a lot of people who would have been invisible have become visible. I was in a room reading my work and I got invited by the African Americans Writers Association to be a feature. I would never have met this person would never have heard my poetry. I had a similar connection with someone in the UK who wanted to do a mixed media collaboration with poetry reading and an artistic installation, and that will open next year. So branding through these sort of social media sites is a must if you want to get in touch with people who are working in tech, who are doing artistic collaborations, because it's an instant access. No need for a plane, no need for any of that. You can just reach out and connect with people. I hope I've answered your question, Dr. Carr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Courtesy. The power of social networks, it's amazing. If there are no other questions, I'll give you guys a minute. Anybody else? Then I will bring today's session to a close. In discussing this seminar with our collaborators, we really wanted to create an event that was relevant to musicians, creatives, inventors, innovators, and for anyone who was really interested in learning about protecting their intellectual property rights. And I think that this has been a very engaging and insightful forum. I want to thank all of today's presenters, Ms. Lily Care Bellamy, Dr. Marcus Duff, Dr. Chantel Watson, Dr. Natalie Courtesy, and Dr. Paulette Carr for your contributions to the program. I would also like to make special mention of Ms. Myrna Douglas, the law librarian who was instrumental in bringing this program together and unfortunately could not be here because she is on leave. I'd also like to thank you, our guests, for attending. Please feel free to reach out to the Mona Library IP Help Desk or any of our speakers today to find out further information, or if you want to start a TISC at your library. And I hope that overall this session has been useful to you. You will see in the chat a form which allows you to give us some feedback on today's session. And I think that ultimately this webinar now brings our 6th annual Open Week to a close. Thanks again to our presenters and thank you for being here.